So what did being a naked butler teach me about sales? Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Sales Circle podcast. This is the podcast designed to help you improve and increase your sales skills. I don't care whether you're a sales owner, a salesperson, sales professional, business owner, entrepreneur. If you have to sell for a living, then this podcast is for you. Every week, every single Thursday, we come out and we talk about some form of topics about sales, whether that be mindset, motivation, stories, questions, whether it be, theories, trainings, whatever it is. My intention with the podcast has always been, you can drive in on the way into work, you can, listen, put the podcast on, give it a listen, feel motivated, feel invigorated. You can listen to it on the way to your client's meeting. You can listen to it whilst you're in the bubble bath, if you so wish. But the idea is, you watch these episodes, you listen to these episodes, and you get a bit of a motivational push to help you increase your sales. I'm your host, Rob Spence. I am an internationally renowned sales trainer, the author of several sales books, and the managing director of a wonderful company called Paragon Sales Solutions. Now, I'm going to warn you about this episode, and in particular, the editors, because this is where things get really awkward when we edit things like this up. Today, I'm going to share my experiences as a naked butler. Yes, probably in my current form, in my current physique. You couldn't imagine it. You probably wouldn't want to imagine it. However, I used to be a butler in the buff, and I'm going to share with you some stories. I'm going to share with you what they taught me about myself, what they taught me about confidence, what they taught me about presenting, and how those transferable skills really helped me when it came to my sales career. Now, again, full warning, there is no script. There are no show notes. There are no guides. This is going to be off the cuff, Rob Spence talking. We'll find a flow, but it's going to be a bit of a fun episode nonetheless. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Before we do crack on to the main part of the episode, just do me a quick favor. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're following on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and let's crack on. So yes, you heard right. I used to be a naked butler. I used to work for one of the leading, probably if not the leading, naked butler agencies in the United Kingdom called Butlers in the Buff. Now, I should probably explain what a naked butler is to those of you that don't know. I assume 99% of you do know. There's some of you that's like, oh, I don't know what one of them is. I'd like to find out. Look, a naked butler is exactly what it says on the tin. So these are the guys who will appear at parties and they will be naked, albeit bar an apron. And yes, I can assure you, nothing was worn underneath. I'm not too sure if some of the guys do, but I used to just be full flowing, should we say. So you'd have a little apron on, and maybe editors, when we're editing this up, maybe we should get some like little photos and clips in there as well. But yeah, so a little apron, you'd have little cuffs on your hand, and of course, the little collar and bow tie around the edge. And the idea was we were good looking, we were conversational, we were hunks, we were sexy. I can't believe I just said that. And we would go to these parties. Once again, I want to make really clear, we were invited. There's laws against us just rocking up to a party uninvited. And we would entertain. Okay, now normally, 9 times out of 10, these were some form of ladies' events. So sometimes it would be a hen party, sometimes it would be a ladies' night at a restaurant or a nightclub, sometimes it would be I actually worked at some of the not the premieres, but some of the movie launches for Magic Mike 2, and that maybe I should share that story later on in this episode because that was a great experience. We also did, divorce parties, hen parties, birthday parties. We did a work do once. I did a baby shower. That was awfully weird. And, sometimes I remember one woman, she was just hosting a dinner party. And I'll be honest, I think she just wanted a bit of extra, to be fair. So there was all sorts. But the main thing is a butler in the buff is there to entertain, to keep the party going, is a bit of entertainment, right? Now, I never grew up. No, tell a lie. Do you know what? I kind of did grow up wanting to be some kind of naked butler, but clearly I couldn't. I don't know if any of you remember the old Diet Coke ads, right? don't know if you can remember the Diet Coke ads, you know, where there'd be ladies working normally in an office, and there'd be hard working, and it gets to break time or whatever, and then that music comes on. I don't want you to be no slave. Like that song, right? Quite a sexy song. And then there'll be some hunk, normally like topless, fixing a machine or working hard in the yard kind of thing. I remember watching those when I was young. I was like, I want to be like that. I know that sounds really weird, but I was like, I want to be, I want to be like that. But I think I applied to be a butler in the Buff when I was 25. And it was one of those things where I was working in sales. I still wasn't necessarily as outgoing and extroverted as I am now. And I wanted something to do in my spare time. I had a lot of spare time on my hands. I'd recently, and this is me being completely honest, recently got divorced, a bit down in the dumps, kind of, just sat at home sometimes. And it wasn't even my home. I was living at my mum's house at the time, which was a bit weird. And it was my 25th birthday, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to do this. I was ripped at the time, which was good. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to do this. So did some hunting, sent off my application, and nothing happened for a little while. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call from a guy called Will. I'll say his name, Will. And Will was the director of Butlers in the Buff. Now, the cool thing was, I don't like to brag, but Butlers in the Buff were the leading agency, right, at the time. There was loads of others out there, but they were normally a bit substandard. The guys weren't as good looking, not quite as model-esque, dare I say. And, Will called me up and went through a bit of an interview process. That was hilarious. And I tell you what, here's lesson number one. Now, we recently put out an episode about trying to get a sales job, right? Getting your dream sales job. And I remember meeting with Will. It was done on it wasn't even done on Zoom. It was done on Skype. That's how long ago this was. And I thought, what am I going to do to stand out here? Don't get me wrong, I'm quite charismatic, quite talkative. I'm okay looking. My body, like I say, I was ripped at the time. And I remember just before the call, I was getting pumped up, had a dining room chair at my desk, and I was lifting that, pushing that, getting as pumped as I could. And I remember, what am I going to do to stand out? And this is what we were talking about in the recent episode, right? I thought, what am I going to do to stand out here? So we got on the call with Will. We was asking all these questions. We're talking X, Y, Z. And obviously, it gets to the awkward bit where he asks you to take your top off, which for part of me, I did think, is this just some kind of way for him to check out some guys topless? I don't know, but it was all legit. And in the end, he said, look, why should we take you on? Why should I hire you? And I did what I thought would be good, and it worked. I did a magic trick. I said to him, Will, listen, I'm a dab hand at a couple of magic tricks, nothing too special. If I can fool you, if I can trick you with this magic trick, you've got to give me a job. How's that sound? He was like, oh, go on then. Did the magic trick, tricked him, and ended up getting hired. So, I guess that to some degree is lesson number one. When we talk about standing out from the crowd, doing things different, I knew that when I kind of put this persona on as this naked butler, and my friends have gone on to call it Showtime Spence, right? I knew I needed to stand out from the crowd. I didn't just want to be, a topless guy. I wanted to be able to go a bit above and beyond. So anyway, that's it. We got this. I got the gig, and it was a really fun experience. And I guess this moves on nicely into lesson number 2, which I think all salespeople should do, which is prepare. Now, I like to over prepare for everything, and at the time when I got into naked butlering, I'd never really made any cocktails. To be honest, I'd rarely popped open a cork in a bottle. And of course, I wanted to look the best. And, I think it goes to a mindset of something that I always want to do in everything that I set out in my career and in my life, is I wanted to be the best. I didn't just want to be a butler in the Buff. I wanted to be the absolute best. So, of course, your nutrition is kept up, your training is kept up. And beyond that, I wanted to make sure that I could do everything. So I started to learn how to make cocktails. I started to practice, popping corks from bottles. I practiced more magic tricks, because what I was trying to do was I was trying to prepare for every eventuality. The worst thing I wanted to do, now bear in mind, getting naked in front of anyone is nerve-wracking, right? I want you to picture yourself right now. If I said to you, right, listen, you have now got to go to a random house sometimes in the middle of nowhere at 8, 9 o'clock at night. You have got to then get your kit off, albeit bar and apron. So your bum's fully on show, you're fully exposed, one strong wind and everything's out, right? And you got to do that in front of 20, 30 people at times. If I said that to you, you'd be going, oh my gosh, that's horrendous. And trust me, that's what was going through my mind. I was nervous, I was panicking, I was anxious, everything was going through my mind, especially on the first time, right? And that's where preparation came into play. And of course, let's try and get this back to some kind of sales lesson. It's the same when you're going to see a new prospect, when you're going to close a deal, when you're making cold calls. Sometimes whenever we face some form of fear, whenever we face some form of reluctance or procrastination, it comes down to a fear of the unknown and a lack of preparation. So again, what I did was I prepared. I practiced and made sure I knew exactly what I was doing. I did it for a number of years, and do you know what? I absolutely loved it. I will, hand on heart and say that a lot of my abilities to network, a lot of my abilities to talk, to converse, and to build relationships quite quickly stems from being a butler in the buff, being a naked butler. Because once again, maybe, lesson number 3 somewhere is we walk into networking events. As salespeople, we walk into networking events. Now, hand on heart, I still to this day get a tiny bit of pre-event nerves. Okay, nothing major, nothing how it used to be, but there's always that, oh gosh, who's going to be here? What am I going to do? What am I going to say? Nowhere near as much as it used to be. But I think whenever I go back, I used to, once again, do that in front of 20 or 30 people. And that allowed me to build up this confidence, this resilience, and this understanding around it. Because I want to make really clear, whenever you walk into one of these, Butler in the Buff parties, whether it be a divorce party, a birthday party, a works party, whatever, you've got to work the room. You've got to make sure that everyone is being looked after and entertained. And what I found was there was always different types of people, right? There was always different types of people within these parties. And I wanted to focus on hen parties at the moment because they were about 90% of what I did. There was those who were like really up for it, right? Not like that. But they were really up for the party. They were up for the fun. They were up for the enjoyment. They were game for they were game for absolute anything. I'm talking body shots, being drank out of my belly button, to whipped cream, to finding all sorts cracking off. Right, there was those that were game. There was always the organised ones. Now, normally what I found within a group of these individuals, there was always 1, 2, potentially 3, but normally a couple of people who were hyper stressed, because these were the organisers. These were the ones that booked the venue, booked the accommodation, booked the activities, booked me, and they were panicking. They were stressed, right? There was those that were nervous, they were anxious, they were shy, right? There was those that would see a naked man and be like, oh, okay, I don't know what to do, don't know how to act, don't know what to do in this situation. There were those as well that found it a bit, I guess for them, maybe degrading and embarrassing as well. They thought, oh, you don't have to be doing this, oh, you look better with your clothes on, which always hurt, by the way, whenever people said that. And, there was always the older girls who absolutely loved it. Goodness, they were always the wildest. I think the point I'm trying to get to is whenever I walked into a room, and this is lesson number 3, I guess, I developed an ability to quickly keep my radars open and understand who wanted what and how people wanted to be treated and how people wanted to be spoken to. We talk a lot about in, sales and sales training about different buyer types, different customer personas, different ways in which we interact with people. I couldn't, those that were absolutely up for it, I could, pour Prosecco down me and let people drink it off. We used to play a game where one person would hide a plaster somewhere on my body. The other person would be blindfolded and would have to use their hands to find it, right? You knew that you could do that with those. You could eventually do it with those that are a bit quiet and a bit timid and a bit shy, but you had to get them out of their shell first, right? Even the same with the event organisers. Again, you had to spend time getting those warmed up and getting them to relax and calm down. And I always made it, although, and once again, I want to focus on hen parties, although I always made an effort on the bride, of course. It's their day, it's their night, it's their weekend, it's their wedding, right? So you've got to give that attention. But actually, I always used to spend special attention on the organisers. excuse me, because it was those organisers that were going through so much stress. They're going through so much like, oh my God, is this going to work? Is this going to happen? Yada, yada, yada. They always put a lot of weight on their shoulders, right? So I would always make sure that I would purposely give them, extra attention, see what I could do to help out, make sure drinks are flowing, see if there's anything I could do to just make their life a tiny bit easier. Because then when you do that within, normally these jobs were 2 to 3 hours, give or take, sometimes more, that then allowed those people to unwind, relax, and just, take a breather. And then once they were able to do that, they could come out their shell. And as well, it was the same with some of the older girls, although they were well up for it and they were like, oh, wow, yeah, look at this. Some of them, I feel at times, were wanted to take the back seat because they wanted a lot of the affection to be put on the younger people. And sometimes that was because I think, wrongly or rightly, those people would be worried and anxious about their appearance, their weight, or that kind of thing. Oh, that guy won't flirt with me. I always beelined for them and flirted with them till the cows came home to once again get them involved. So, like I say, and this is the lesson number 3, I think I said, when we're walking into a room, my job was very quickly to understand these groups, understand different personalities, understand how people were, and speaking to people in different ways and acting in different ways. I was then able to gather them people together to then all wholesomely get involved and be entertained and have a great night as one, instead of feeling a bit awkward and a bit shy. And look, there was loads of examples of that. And it was the same, to be fair, look, it was the same when there was guys there. I remember going to a nightclub in Nottingham, in the basement in Nottingham. It was weird, actually, when you think about it. It was Birmingham, beg your pardon, Birmingham. And it was a work party and there was guys there. And some of the games we were playing that plaster game I just shared with you. Once again, for you as a butler in the buff, for you as a salesperson, sometimes you've got to lose some of those prerequisites, some of those assumptions and so on, and just allow, the night to flow and everything. So, I'm trying to keep this as sales-based as possible, I guess another thing that I learned a lot from being a butler in the buff or being a naked butler is the ability to be a confident and confident public speaker. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I ever had to stand up and give a speech or anything, but you are the center of attention in those moments. And once again, now, when you go into a BNI room, for argument's sake, and you've got to give a speech or a pitch, all eyes are on you. There's still 30 people in the room looking at you. Again, that's so much easier when you've got clothes on and you're talking about business. But when you're stepping into a room of 20, 30 people, and you are trying to appease and entertain them, especially when you may not be their type. Look, there's loads of different types of men. I was blue-eyed, mousy brown kind of hair, charismatic, funny, with some magic tricks up my apron kind of thing. Whereas there was other butlers I worked with, they were big, they were broad, they were huge, some had a bit more body fat, but they were still huge, You've got, when you're sort of stood up, when you're walking into that room for the first time, you've got all eyes on you, and once again you're being judged. And once again, I think if we were to turn that into lesson number 4, it made me realise that actually, business and sales isn't a one size fits all. You're not going to please and appease everyone. It doesn't mean you can't put the effort in. It doesn't mean you can't do what you can to entertain or to be hospitable to people. You flow from there. Overall, look, the experience of being a naked butler was absolutely great for me. It allowed me to really come out of my shell, understand good hospitality, understand good entertainment, understand communication skills. And I think I'm going to move that on to lesson number 5 is I found, we spoke earlier about how we're opening these people up, how we're engaging these different groups of people. I found the best thing to ever do was, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, is ask questions. Once again, if I saw a group of people who are a bit shy, who didn't really necessarily want to get involved too much, I'd go over and ask some questions. And, some of those questions were quite, top level, proper British small talk. So what do you do for work then? How's the day been? What activities did you do? How was that? But by asking those questions, once again, it allowed those barriers to come down, that trust to be opened up. It allowed more two-way conversations to flow, and then ultimately truly allowed us to fully engage and fully invoke that relationship, which once again lowered those barriers and got everyone entertained. I think I talk a lot about the podcast about planting seeds and longer term relationships, and it's quite funny how excuse me, I've stayed in touch with a lot of my former, naked butlers. Some have gone on to do some great things. One, unfortunately there was some tragic news about him thereafter, but he went on to become quite famous on X Factor. Two went on X Factor. One, unfortunately, I don't believe is no longer with us. Another one is still singing and in business. Others I'm still friends with. One's a doctor and he's just got married, and I think he's got a baby on the way. But I've also stayed in touch with some of the people that I've met during these jobs, and not in a seedy way, but they've remained friends. We've remained in touch, which has become like a really, really lovely thing, because those people then open those doors, further down the line, which is absolutely incredible. I think, look, I could sit here all day and talk about my life as a naked butler, and don't worry, there is ideas for a book at some stage, because there are some wild stories, some really nice wholesome stories as well, I want to make clear, but there were some wild stories all the same. I think, look, a big lesson that being a naked butler taught me was to just do it, to just throw yourself into life. I think many of us get held back for some reason, or for whatever reason, and I've actually found in life, and in particular in sales and in business, sometimes when we see an opportunity, it's best to just go for it and take it. I could have easily, when I'd had a whiskey or two, applied for this butler in the buff job. I could have easily then panicked the next day and revoked it. I could have easily, when I got booked for that first job, panicked and walked away from that. But I prepared and I practiced for it. I don't know if any of you have seen the film Yes Man, and it's based on a book. It's got Jim Carrey in it. And although, of course, it's a bit of fun, a bit trivial, for me, Yes Man is fantastic because it teaches us all about, why saying yes sometimes is good. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes we don't want to be a busy fool, and saying yes too many times can at times put pressure on us. But actually, life is full of opportunities. Life is full of experiences. Life is full of adventure. And we can easily say no to things. We can opt for comfort. We can opt for the easy route. We can opt for what we know. And actually, sometimes prosperity is on that other side of opportunity. And sometimes we've got to take that by both horns. I will accredit a lot of my confidence in communication, in talking to people, in being able to open up conversations, in networking, in developing relationships, to being a naked butler. Being a naked butler allowed me to understand myself, understand different personalities, put myself in positions that at times were challenging, that at times were tough, at times were stressful. Like I say, we've spoken about all the good, but sometimes there were some negatives. You've got to think sometimes. I remember working a nightclub, doing a ladies' night, and guys don't like good-looking guys, especially ugly, fat guys, which is weird. Ugly guys don't like good-looking guys, and I've been threatened, I've been pushed. I've had to kind of really handle things in certain ways to get out of those situations. Again, sometimes you're working, excuse me, a job. 10 until midnight in Leamington Spa, which is, a couple of, an hour's drive from me, give or take. You've got to deal with those long hours and so on. So although, yes, I learned a lot about myself and my communication skills from the good elements of being a butler in the buff, but I also learned a lot from the bad elements of being a butler in the buff. I learned a lot about how to handle things, what to do, what not to do, how to communicate out of certain situations as well. So listen, today's episode was more of me storytelling to some degree and reliving some memories. But there's some lessons there that I hope you've been able to take away. I hope so anyway. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to go out there and become a naked butler. Or, of course, they do have butlerettes. If you are a lady watching this, you can, if you wish, become a butlerette. But I'm not expecting that. I think really we're trying to talk about those lessons in terms of communication, putting yourselves in those uncomfortable circumstances, preparing. And you know what? Just damn going for it, really. So again, listen, it's been a bit of a wishy-washy episode. We will end on a bit of a book recommendation, get sales things back on track. But stay tuned one day for Rob Spence, Butler in the Buff memoirs, because there's some good stories that I think you'll absolutely love. So before we do close off, allow me to share with you my book recommendation of the week. I was supposed to share this a couple of weeks ago, but I found another book that was relevant, so I've kept this to one side. Now, I think being a naked butler, being a butler in the buff, again, sort of really personifies and symbolises what I believe in the fact that we are all salespeople, right? We've all got to sell on a daily basis, whether we are selling the idea on someone to go on a date with us, the idea for someone to send us a refund, the idea for, our boss to give us a pay rise. Whether you are a salesperson or not, we are all in sales. And this book by Daniel Pink, To Sell Is Human, I don't know if you can see that in the light, is a fantastic read that helps to really look at some of those principles and theories. Now, Daniel Pink has gone on to become a sort of an international success. Many people know him. And that's why I've recommended this book. Let's have a look here. It says, life is all about pitching. The problem is that we're not very good at it. Each day, millions of people earn their keep by convincing someone else to make a purchase. They sell planes to airlines, oil shares to sheiks, cars to drivers, blah, 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 blah. In fact, each and every one of us spends a lot of our time trying to persuade others to part with resources, money, effort, attention. Though most of the time we don't realise we're doing it. Here we go. Parents sell kids going to bed. Spouses sell their partners on mowing the lawn or putting the cat out. We sell our bosses on giving us more money and more time off. Blah, 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 blah. In this new book from the best-selling author of Drive, Daniel Pink explores the ways in which we can all improve our sales acumen in every area of our lives and identifies the 3 personal qualities and 3 essential skills necessary to move people. Talks about the sciences behind persuasion, influence, and gives lots of ideas. So again, if you're a salesperson, a business owner that's looking for a book that helps people, that will help you with your sales skills, this book is for you. Again, as always, we will make sure we will put the link for you to grab your own copy to this in the show notes below. And that wraps us up for this week's episode of the Sales Circle podcast. I hope you've been able to take something away. This is one of the few episodes I've done this season where there's been no script, no flow. It's just been me off the cuff, and I hope I've allowed the episode to flow. Again, I'm not expecting you to go out there and become a butlerette or a butler in the buff whatsoever, but please do remember to prepare. Get ready to converse with people. Look out for different consumer and buyer types. Make sure you are taking every opportunity that you can. And I'm sure there's some other lessons in there as well. We are back again next Thursday, wherever you stream your podcast, whether that is on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or of course over on YouTube. The only thing I ask is please, please, please drop us a follow or subscribe. The more of those we get, the more budget we can enhance, and then the better things we can bring to you and the more value we can bring to you. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. It's an absolute pleasure to sit down here and talk with you today. Until next time, all the best. And that's it for another episode of the Sales Circle. Make sure you hit that follow button, join us over on social media, and we'll see you next week.